Tim, the Insurance Technical Podcast brought to you by IABNY. I'm your host, Tim Dodge, and I'm coming to you today from the construction zone here in the Geek Cave, deep within the confines of IABNY headquarters here in DeWitt, New York. Now, recently we had the New York State Fair here in the Syracuse area, and one of the biggest attractions at the New York State Fair was the Trusted Choice Chopper, which you'll see featured on the TV show American Chopper, airing on the Discovery Channel on Monday, September 17th. Such your TiVos. Anyway, the chopper was set up in the middle of a display of hot tubs. Our partner Tarson Pools very graciously donated free space for us to display the chopper and get the word out about Trusted Choice to all the people going through the Center of Progress building at the State Fair. Now, I spent about 6 hours working, manning the IABNY booth with watching the chopper, and I was surrounded by all these hot tubs, and I got thinking, hey, how about a hot tub for the Geek Cave? Now, the Geek Cave really isn't that big, so I got to take out a wall here, to be honest with you, to fit it in. But, I'm a big podcast star. I'm entitled to certain luxuries here, and it's really just Brenda Strong's office on the other side of that wall, and I don't think she'll mind all that much other than a little bit of plaster dust. So I've got all these tools here. I got the hammer, and got my needle nose pliers for pulling out nails and such. Somebody was silly enough to give me some sharp objects here. I got a screwdriver and a little manual drill action here. Tape measure, because you know what they always say, measure once, cut twice. And for the final blow for taking out that wall, I got this mallet, and I've been practicing. I can pound that mallet just as good as anybody. Well, we'll take a break from the construction right now. What I want to talk to you about today, though, is about classification of employees on construction sites. In 2010, the New York State Legislature and then Governor David Paterson enacted a law called the New York Construction Industry Fair Play Act. They enacted this law because there was rampant misclassification of employees, particularly with contractors in the New York City area. They were calling employees independent contractors rather than employees. This meant that if somebody's an independent contractor, the hiring contractor does not have to pay workers' compensation for that employee, unemployment insurance for that employee, and sort of other costs. So it was giving those contractors who were cheating an unfair competitive advantage over all the law-abiding contractors out there. So the legislature enacted this law. And what it says is that for any person performing services for a contractor is presumed to be an employee of that contractor for workers' compensation purposes. So that's when the Workers' Compensation Board looks at an employment situation where somebody got hurt, they're going to start from the assumption that that person is an employee. And we're talking about construction only here, so I don't want to generalize. I'm going to do a separate episode of this podcast with regard to non-construction environments. So the assumption is that the person who is injured on the job is an employee. The only way they're going to be considered an independent contractor is if that person meets 3 criteria. Number 1, that person is free from control and direction in performing the work, both in contract and in fact. So not only does the contract say that the person is free to do the job how they want and when they want, but that's actually reality. When they're actually performing the work, the contractor isn't standing over there saying, how come you weren't here at 8 o'clock? The person doing the work is free to do it however they want and when they want. Number 2, the person is performing services outside the normal operations of the contractor that hired them. So perhaps the hiring contractor does framing, needs somebody to put up the drywall. This particular person does drywall installation. In that situation, it'd be reasonable to assume, yes, this person does different work than the person that hired them, and therefore they might be an independent contractor. In number 3, that person is engaged in an independently established trade or occupation or business similar to the service that they're doing for this particular contract. So not only is this person doing drywall installation for this contractor today, but has another job doing drywall installation for somebody else next week and doing it for somebody else a month from now. So this person does drywall installation as part of their trade, and they do it independently, and this is the regular course of their business. So if somebody meets all three of those criteria, the workers' comp board will say, yes, that person is an independent contractor. You don't have to cover them for workers' comp or anything else. There is also a test to determine whether somebody is a separate business entity. And if the comp board determines that someone's a separate business entity, then all these requirements I'm talking about, they fall on that separate business entity. But for the person we're talking about to be a separate business entity, they have to meet all 12 of the following criteria. Number 1, they have to be performing the service free from direction or control of the hiring contractor. Their operation cannot be subject to cancellation when the work ends. They have to have a substantial investment in the capital that is being used on the job. And we're talking about beyond ordinary tools and equipment that would be used for work like this. They have to own the capital in the business and be subject to profit or loss from the work from this particular project. They have to make their services available to the general public or the business community at large. They have to include the services on their federal income tax schedule. They have to perform the services under the name of that business entity. They have to obtain and pay for any required licenses or permits. They have to furnish their own tools and equipment for work on the job. They have to hire their own employees without contractor approval, pay the employees without reimbursement from the contractor, and report those employees' wages to the IRS. They have to have the right to perform similar services for other persons or entities. And finally, the contractor that's hired them cannot be representing to the public or to other contractors that the person or that person's employees are in fact the contractor's own employees. If all 12 of those criteria are met, then we're talking about a separate business entity, and that business entity then has to comply with the requirements of the Construction Industry Fair Play Act. Now, the consequences for violating these rules, for misclassifying an employee as an independent contractor, can be pretty steep. $2,500 fine per misclassified employee for the first violation, $5,000 per misclassified employee for any subsequent violations. And those are just the civil penalties. A contractor could be subject to criminal prosecution as well, punishment by up to 30 days in jail, and a fine of up to $25,000 for the first offense, and the penalties get stiffer after that. And those penalties apply to a contractor who willfully violates the law, who knew or should have known that the person they called an independent contractor was actually an employee under the law. I'm going to be back with another episode in a few weeks on how you determine whether somebody is an independent contractor in a non-construction environment. In the meantime, if you need more information about workers' compensation, check out the workers' compensation page in the research section of the IABNY website. And if you need to get a hold of me, as always, you can reach me by phone at 800-851-8853, by email at tdodge@iabney.org. You can reach me by fax at 888-432-0510. I'm on AOL Instant Messenger as tdog4494. I'm on Twitter as AskTim. And if you happen to see me out and about somewhere, teaching a class or a conference or something like that, feel free to stop by and say hello and ask me your questions then. Thanks for watching this episode of Ask Tim. Thanks for indulging my penchant for knocking down walls. And remember, if you ever need something destroyed in your office, don't forget to ask Tim.